So we hope that you met someone new in your breakout group or were able to connect with an old friend or colleague that you used to see at our annual meeting. While we're really good at hosting virtual events, we can't wait to meet in person again. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Stacy Butel and I'm the Executive Director of Walk Boston. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white middle-aged woman with light brown hair and blue eyes. This is Walk Boston's 32nd annual meeting and the third one we've held on Zoom. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Walk Boston board and staff. Brendan and I will be the only staff members speaking tonight to make transitions simpler, but if you scan your Zoom window and see the orange backgrounds, you can find our staff and many of our board members. You'll also see that Walk Boston staff will be active on the chat during tonight's meeting, providing you with resources and of course, encouraging donations. So keep your eye on that chat as the meeting continues. So now a quick year in review for 2021. In 2021, Walk Boston moved forward with our walkability programs, our advocacy efforts, and virtual events despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. People continued to value places where they can walk safely and took to the streets, sidewalks, and trails to get to work, walk the dog, visit local shops, and find community. Our work resonated with many as we advocated for slower speeds and more space for people walking. Our Boston-based advocacy work continued on projects such as the Arbor Way, Northern Avenue Bridge, the I-90 multimodal project, and Rutherford Avenue. We wrote letters to tackle larger policy issues like revisions to the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD, and use of the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act to promote walkability. And with your help at the last annual meeting, we advocated to continue the very successful MassDOT Shared Streets and Spaces funding program that built sidewalks, painted crosswalks, calmed traffic, and provided outdoor dining opportunities. Last Friday, we released a summary report that reminds us of why Walk Boston must continue to fight for safer streets throughout Massachusetts. In 2021, we lost 75 people walking to traffic violence, which accounts for 18% of all lives lost to crashes in the Commonwealth. Every life lost is tragic, and our report shows that over half of the deaths happened in just 12 communities. Boston and Springfield, two cities where Walk Boston continues to focus our advocacy efforts, top that list. We also found that older adults were hit and killed at a higher rate than those in other age groups. 36% of fatal crash victims were over the age of 65. This report has gotten a lot of press, and a link to the press release and full report is in the chat. These statistics are not vastly different from those seen in years past, but our tracking and blogging about the details of each of these crashes gives us the opportunity to remember all the people lost, not just those crashes that draw media attention. And it elevates pedestrian safety as a statewide issue that policymakers, legislators, and those responsible for road design must address if we are to eliminate pedestrian deaths in Massachusetts. Once vaccines were widely available last spring, Walk Boston staff were back out conducting walk audits in person in the rural Western Massachusetts towns of Blandford, Chesterfield, and Cummington, as well as the gateway cities of Fall River, Fitchburg, Haverhill, and Worcester, among others. In rural village centers and in downtown urban districts, we work to identify and recommend short-term, low-cost fixes to the common safety concerns found in all walking environments. The need for smooth, connected sidewalks, well-marked, frequent crosswalks, and traffic signals that give people enough time to cross the street. But walkability means so much more than sidewalks, and over the last couple of years, we've been even more intentional about addressing issues of housing, parking, land use, and public space in our work and in our advocacy. You'll hear us talk about resilient social infrastructure alongside safe walking infrastructure. We as an organization are also working to broaden the definition of safety. Feeling safe and a sense of belonging means different things to different people. At Walk Boston, we envision a Massachusetts where people walking, no matter their race, identity, ability, or lived experience, feel safe, connected, and valued on our streets and sidewalks. In addition to our advocacy initiatives and walkability programs, Walk Boston was busy hosting virtual events throughout 2021. We started Walk Boston's Talk the Walk, Not Just Books Club, and discussed the 15-minute city concept. Stay tuned for an invitation to the next Not Just Books Club meeting later this spring. We held a speed management workshop where people from across the state shared experiences, successes, and barriers to addressing high traffic speeds in their neighborhoods. And we honored our beloved Bob Sloan, who passed away on May 12th in 2021. We held a virtual celebration of his life that brought together friends, fellow advocates, and family to remember his wisdom, wit, and creative spirit. We rounded off the year with our second annual Beat the Bay State Challenge that brought together 540 participants and 32 teams to walk the 900-mile boundary of Massachusetts virtually. 2021 proved to be financially successful for Walk Boston through the acquisition of new grants, another extremely popular Beat the Bay State, and renewed support from our annual sponsors. We have begun 2 major new programs in the city of Boston. We've partnered with Green Roots, an environmental justice organization working in Chelsea and East Boston, to work with a group of residents to make walking routes to several of East Boston parks safer, and more inclusive. And as part of a 5-year project, we're working with Boston Medical Center researchers to study the impact of signed walking routes and printed walking maps on residents' decisions around physical activity. Over the last year, Walk Boston has been working with the Stepping Strong Center for Trauma Innovation at Brigham and Women's Hospital on a project to engage hospital injury prevention professionals in pedestrian advocacy. We believe that engaging with hospitals and bringing the voices of healthcare professionals into the pedestrian safety movement holds great potential to strengthen our effectiveness. We are also thrilled to continue our age and dementia-friendly walking work with a new focus on disability professionals, including travel trainers, those that train people with disabilities to use public transit, and others who provide care to older adults. 2021 also saw changes in board and staff members. Board President Betsy Johnson will talk more about changes to the board in her comments, but I'd like to thank the 4 board members who stepped off the board in 2021 for their service: Amy Branger, Joyce DeBona, Eric Lund, and Greg Rogers. This year, we welcomed 2 new program managers, Miranda Briseño and Aisha Merothra, to get all this new work done. Miranda is a Tufts Urban and Environmental Planning Program graduate and comes to us from the planning department at the City of Medford. Aisha is a Harvard Graduate School of Design graduate who started as an intern with us in 2019 and thankfully is now on staff full-time. We are a staff of 6, more diverse than ever, with more dogs than ever, and Alto the cat, but the same dedication to making walking safer, more inclusive, and more enjoyable across the Commonwealth. After 2 years of being a fully virtual organization, we are now back in Boston, sharing space with our transportation advocacy friends. Come visit. We're just down the street from our old office space on School Street. It's a place to come together, meet new partners, and reconnect with people we've not seen in person since all this began. We, like many with office jobs, are trying to figure out what a hybrid office environment looks like for us. We'll keep you posted and would love to hear how all of you are managing new commuting patterns and navigating new office policies. Thank you for joining us tonight. I can't wait to honor our Golden Shoe winners and hear Kyle's talk. However, I would be remiss if I did not give our outstanding board president, Betsy Johnson, a chance to welcome you and say a few words. Betsy.
All right, we're having trouble with Betsy here. She was just here and she just dropped off, so.
Okay.
So we'll give her 1 second to join. In the meantime, Miranda has been very active in the chat, sharing a bunch of the different programs that Stacy was talking about just now. And so we definitely encourage you to check out some of those links. And so you can find out a little bit more about some of what Stacy was talking about. So.
We could flip flop, Brendan, and we could do the Golden Shoe Awards first, and then Betsy can make her comments after that.
I think that's lovely.
Oh, looks like she's back.
She is back. Okay. Okay.
She wanted to make a grand appearance.
I think that's definitely what it was.
Yes, well, sorry, yes, no, the internet, of course, it becomes unstable when you have to join.
Yeah.
So I gather I'm on.
You're on.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Betsy.
Hello, my name is Betsy Johnson. I am the current board president, and following Stacy's lead, I use the she, her pronouns. I am white. I'm over 70, with graying hair and brown eyes. And but first, so thank you, Stacy. So during these trying times, it's incredibly important to take the time to celebrate your successes and the amazing work of the many people who have made these successes possible. To that end, Stacy, I really want to thank you personally and say congratulations. Nothing like coming on as our new executive director and then having COVID hit. But also just the incredible team that has done a phenomenal job navigating these most challenging times with skill and perseverance. So over the last year, as you mentioned, we've continued our work across the state, promoting our renewed age and dementia friendly grant program with the Point 32 Health Foundation, but have also joined forces with new partners like Boston Children's Hospital and the Jillian Rennie Stepping Center, or the Stepping Strong Center for Trauma Innovation. You have formed partnerships and relationships with local organizations like the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition and Green Roots. By reaching out to these organizations, these new communities and partners, we have not only expanded Walk Boston's reach across the state, but brought new voices and perspectives to the walkability conversations. On top of all of this, the day-to-day advocacy work, the new programs, the adaptations to virtual and hybrid work environment, you also made the time and effort to lead us in a new strategic planning process. This process, with the help of the Barr Foundation, was undertaken carefully and methodically, with the hiring of a consultant to help us make sure that our work and our new plans would be rooted in equity and inclusion. Board and staff members came together to form a strategic planning committee where we began what is called a real-time strategic planning process. We analyzed where we began, where we are today, and where we want to be. Over the course of our work, we ended up with 3 key questions. How can we effectively address racial equity? Where geographically should we focus our work? And how can we evaluate the impact we are having? The new plan isn't quite finished, so stay tuned, but we believe it embodies our values of community, equity, and partnerships, and sets a clear path for us to follow in the coming years to achieve our vision of a Massachusetts where people are walking, no matter their race, identity, ability, or lived experience. They feel safe, connected, and valued on our streets and sidewalks. A new strategic plan is a massive undertaking, and I want to take a moment to thank the board for its leadership during this process. I also want to extend my deep gratitude to those who have stepped down during this past year, who Stacy mentioned, but it's worth my repeating, Amy Branger, Joyce DeBona, Eric Lund, and Greg Rogers. You'll see some of these folks here tonight. Thank you for your guidance over the years and for helping us make Massachusetts a safer and more walkable place. I also add that this is not a goodbye because a number of these people will stay involved with the organization, including Amy, who we're going to hear from Amsterdam and the Netherlands. We do expect regular updates and photos. When board members leave, this also gives us the opportunity to bring in new people to the Walk Boston family. Let me thus welcome our newest board member, Tony Wayne. You can wave for those on gallery. Who brings with him a wealth of knowledge and years of nonprofit experience and has stepped right up and is already hard at work as our new board treasurer. Thank you, Tony, and welcome to the family. For those of you who have been part of Walk Boston for years, you likely know that I no longer live in Boston, but now have actually been in Springfield for 10 years. It's hard to believe. And that I have been a vocal proponent of continuing to broaden our reach across the state. I always have to introduce ourselves as I'm with Walk Boston. And despite the name, we are very much a statewide organization. As such, it should be of no surprise that here one of the aspects of our new strategic plan that I'm particularly excited about is the emphasis on our statewide efforts. Though we have not officially begun our new strategic plan, some of this work is already underway. One of these efforts is an increased focus of our Walk Massachusetts network. We are bringing together people and organizations from across the Commonwealth to learn from and support each other, to share technical knowledge and funding opportunities, and to amplify our collective voices. Together at our monthly meetings, we are tackling issues that range from parklets and snow clearance to the implications that mobility issues have for larger movements like climate change and racial justice. I would personally like to issue an invitation to all of you here tonight to join us and become part of the Walk Massachusetts network. That's information being put on the chat about our monthly Zoom meetings and how to sign up. The upside of COVID is we know now how to have virtual meetings. Our program manager, Miranda, who you've seen in the chat, would also be more than happy to talk to you about it as well. She looks forward to hearing what time of the day would work best for more of us to actually join and what topics would get you to come to one of our meetings. So we really look forward to seeing you at our next meeting on April 20th. In addition to inviting you to join the Walk Massachusetts network, I am also now asking you to help fund Walk Boston. And as you just saw put on the screen, in our many projects, like the Massachusetts network. And as you've heard tonight, we wouldn't be here in our 32nd year if we didn't have supporters like you. And so if you are here tonight and you know the value of our work, you know that we are all pedestrians and that the changes we make in our communities benefit everyone. That when we make our sidewalks and streets safer for people in wheelchairs, we also make them safe for children. Because you know our work is so important is why we're asking you to make a contribution tonight, to put your money where your feet are, so to speak. That's maybe our new tagline. We're trying it out here. The link to donate is in the chat. And as a reminder, we have a $5,000 match happening right now. So if you'd like to double your contribution in impact, now is the time to act. On behalf of everyone at Walk Boston, thank you for your support and our commitment to walkability and improving the lives of everyone who lives, works, and plays in Massachusetts. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. I just want to thank everyone so much who's donated to support us, not just tonight, but also over the years. We're so grateful for all of you. especially during these past couple of years that's been so uncertain and unpredictable. The donation link will be active throughout the event. And if you have any difficulty or questions, just let us know. We're going to turn now our attention to one of the best parts of our annual celebration, where we get to honor and reward those individuals and groups who have bettered the walking environment and who exemplify the ideals that guide Walk Boston. Tonight, we are presenting 3 Golden Shoe Awards, and it's my pleasure to introduce each of them. The first Golden Shoe Award of the evening goes to Josh Ostroff. Many of you may know Josh as the interim director of the Transportation for Massachusetts Coalition, but that's not why we're honoring him tonight. Josh, we're honoring you for your unwavering commitment to walking advocacy in Natick and the greater Metro West region. As a Natick Select Board member in 2011, you reached out to Walk Boston for input on the town's pedestrian plan and championed our Good Walking is Good Business program. Over the years, you've been a complete streets advocate, served on the Natick Transportation Advisory Committee and the working group for the Natick Center MBTA Accessibility Improvements Project. After many years of working and waiting, you finally saw the opening of the Cochituate Rail Trail, a 4-mile multi-use trail connecting the village of Saxonville and Framingham to Natick Center in 2021. Thank you for your dogged persistence and your contagious enthusiasm. I'm going to turn it over to Josh to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Stacy. This is really a terrific honor. So, Josh Ostroff from Natick. I'm a volunteer in town government and on staff as Stacy said, at T4 Mass. Walk Boston's a founding member of this coalition to promote just and sustainable, accessible, modern, and safe mobility statewide. And I use he, him pronouns. I just want to thank the staff of Walk Boston, the volunteers, board members, and funders for this amazing honor, which I'm so pleased to accept, not just for me, but on behalf of all the partners I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. And I just want to take a moment to talk about the value of advocacy partnerships, because I think we make progress by being relentless, which I will admit is a superpower, but also just engaging with many people and perspectives and agencies to make progress possible. And just ensure that we have durable relationships. I just believe we need to be available to people and share knowledge, share credit, and never be afraid to take risks. And don't be afraid to be annoying, it's been said of me. But I think of people in public works or legislators, volunteers, councils on aging, commission on disability, schools, town and city administrators, agencies, MassDOT, MEPC, contractors, artists, consultants, and of course, Walk Boston. Yes, I would like to put in a plug for supporting Walk Boston. So please do that. Just thinking of like my Walk Boston origin story, as Stacy recalled, yep, it was something like 10 years ago where we first met up. And it was great to have those connections because it really helped me serve people who were in need. You know, through a project that the Metro West Health Foundation made possible called Safe Steps, we got together with Walk Boston. We made great progress, including on the Cochituate Rail Trail, which I invite you all to come enjoy. I'll give you a guided tour. I just want to say that over the years of effort, which have paid dividends, but I think of the arc of progress, and I'm actually less satisfied as time goes by. I think of like sidewalks and snow, or the struggle of people with mobility limitations, or these intractable problems that we're all trying to solve. And we can never be satisfied when there's injustice. We just have to keep at it, and also pave the way for people who are going to pick up where we leave off. Although this is not a lifetime achievement award, it's a work in progress award. Just want to close and acknowledge my mom, Elaine Ostroff, who was my very first mentor. And just hearty congratulations to the other honorees. I'm so pleased to share this evening with everyone. In closing, I just welcome hearing from any and all of you on any project or initiative where we can work together. And thank you, Stacy and the Walk Boston team for this wonderful honor.
You're welcome. Thanks, Josh. Walk Boston, as you mentioned, is an active member of the T4 Mass Coalition, and many of us on staff represent walking on multiple committees. So thank you for giving us a place in each of those committees, and also for ensuring that walking remains a part of the transportation conversation. And it's fun to share an office with you and your staff too. So Thank you very much.
Happy.
The next Golden Shoe Award goes to another highly deserving person who spent her career fighting for the needs of people walking with disabilities, both mobility issues, vision impairments, and intellectual disabilities. Her name is Meg Robertson. Meg was most recently the director of the Orientation and Mobility Department at the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. We would like to recognize you, Meg, for always asking the hard questions about traffic signals, for beating the drum for accessible walking routes during construction projects, and for speaking up for the needs of people with disabilities on many committees and task forces, such as the Massachusetts Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, even in retirement. Your knowledge of inclusive walkable spaces has made all of us better advocates. And I'll turn it over to Meg to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Walk Boston for this honor. I'd also like to thank Peter Sutton, Jackie DeWolf, Bay State Roads, and Mass Commission for the Blind, who have also supported my advocacy. I also need to acknowledge Janet Barlow, who was a mentor to myself and others in the field of orientation and mobility, traffic engineering, and land planning around the country. Although I'm retired from the Commission for the Blind, as Stacy mentioned, I continue to advocate by being a member of the Mass Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board and the AAR Orientation and Mobility Environmental Access Committee. I also attend the annual Transportation Research Board meetings in DC to highlight the needs of pedestrians with sensory disabilities. Over the years, as an orientation mobility specialist, the pedestrian environment has become more complex for all pedestrians, especially those with sensory disabilities. Some of these designs include curb cut placements without detectable warnings, which are the yellow bumps, actuated intersections without accessible pedestrian signals, the audible and tactile components, complex intersection design, share paths, incorrect use of pedestrian barricades and channelizing devices, wayfinding roundabouts, mid-street crossings without accessible walk signals, lack of sidewalk snow removal, and sidewalk repair. I'm sure Kyle will discuss some of these in his presentation. Although the Americans with Disability Act requires equal access, individuals with sensory disabilities are often left out of the conversation. In Massachusetts, there are over 25,000 individuals who are legally blind. Most of the population is over the age of 60, and vision loss increases as one ages. Many of these individuals never realize that they would not be driving throughout their lifetime. At this time, they realize there's a lack of equality for pedestrians versus drivers. With Walk Boston's advocacy, we are seeing a change in the pedestrian environment that's improving it for these individuals. I'd like to end with a quote from Fred Rogers. "We live in a world in which we share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, it's not my community, it's not my world, it's not my problem. There are those who see the need and respond, and I consider those people my heroes. I have always felt that Walk Boston is one of those heroes, as well as the other Golden Shoe winners. And I thank you for considering me to be one as well. Thank you very much."
Thank you, Meg. That was an amazing acceptance speech, comments. Thank you so much. So our last Golden Shoe Award of the evening goes to Just Walk Boston. To be clear, we are not giving ourselves an award. Rather, we are awarding the walking group established by Brandy Cruthird in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. Just Walk Boston was founded not only as a way for people to walk off stress and get some exercise, but also as a means to fight pandemic-induced loneliness and segregated public spaces. At a time when the COVID-19 pandemic paralyzed the world and Black and Latinx neighborhoods were being disproportionately impacted by the virus, you and your walkers took action. Your mission of walking for justice, for community, and for health resonated with us, and we hope to partner with you and your members to make walking safer and public spaces more inclusive in and around Franklin Park. With your help, we can make Massachusetts a safer, more equitable, and more inclusive place for all of us. Brandy is here with us tonight and accepting the award for Just Walk Boston. So Brandy, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to thank the staff and volunteers of Walk Boston for selecting the Just Walk Boston program as one of this year's recipients. I would also like to acknowledge the other winners for tonight and winning and doing such great work along with myself, I guess, and other people. But when I think of the work of Just Walk Boston, it wasn't just me. It was the Franklin Park Coalition who helped me get the walking program started. It was the Boston Globe who put the story on the front page. And it was also NECN who came out and did the story and walked with me along with the other walkers. Moreover, I want to thank my community for the support in which we received, but I want to thank every walker that when I put the flyer up on Instagram, Facebook, and all of the media channels, they came out and together, from going from a lonely place due to the pandemic, we became friends. We all started walking together, sharing stories, and loneliness no longer existed during the pandemic. Moreover, I also want to acknowledge the community in which we live. We're talking about the hardest hit, Latinos, Blacks, were most hardest hit by the pandemic. This allowed us to take ownership of our health, get out and walk together, share our stories, and become one. And moreover, get to know our community because we became part of the community. So walking for me and for the Just Walk Boston group wasn't just about walking. It was about bringing people together, helping them see their community in a different light. Both older people walked, younger people walked, and we walked for over 120 days together. We met 4 times a week, and we walked at Franklin Park. Sometimes we just walked those days, and other days we came together when we didn't have the organized walk going on. So I want to acknowledge all the walkers. So if you're there, I just want to say thank you, because walking is God's gift to me because I like to exercise, and he allowed me to share my talent with you guys. But you guys changed my life. So you think that I changed yours, you changed mine. Walk Boston, I wasn't expecting this award. I want to say thank you. I love my shoe, so I have to make sure I show it. It is so cute. And I'd like to say, I'm not just the winner tonight. There were a lot of shoes out there walking with me. And I want to acknowledge them for every step they took with me and how hard they worked. And just for bringing stuff together as a community. I'm still overwhelmed. Normally, if you know me, I speak, but today I just feel like crying. And I just want to say, Walk Boston, thank you to all the walkers that came out. Thank you. And may we keep walking and changing the health of Boston and beyond.
Brandy, thank you so much for those comments. The work that you're doing, the fun that you're having in the parks, that's what it's about. And we just really appreciate all that you do. So I just want to congratulate one more time all of the Golden Shoe winners. Your work inspires us all, and we are so proud to walk alongside of you. I'm now going to turn over to our keynote speaker for the evening. Kyle has spent his entire professional career working with community-based organizations and local government. Most recently, Kyle Robidoux worked as the Chief of Staff for Mayor Kim Janey's Council President Office, and currently works with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Office of Housing Stability as the Assistant Director. Kyle is a sponsored athlete and an ultra distance runner and the current board president with Friendship Works. He lives in the Lower Roxbury neighborhood of Boston with his wife and daughter. Kyle has also shared his lived experience as a legally blind individual to inform others about the importance of access to safe walking environments. Kyle, I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for those kind remarks. I would definitely temper your excitement, but we'll see what we can do. I just want to first start by acknowledging and congratulating the 3 winners, Brandy and Josh and Meg, particularly all 3 of you, congratulations. You are inspiring, and I don't use that word lightly. And just a quick shout out to Meg. I just started a new job 3 months ago, so I've re-engaged the Mass Commission for the Blind in their orientation mobility services. So thank you for your legacy and your work there. It continues, and your impact continues to impact to be felt every day. So I also want to thank the Walk Boston staff for your work every day, your tireless advocacy, your commitment to accessibility and inclusion is much appreciated, and tremendous amount of gratitude, as well as the board members. And for you all on the call, thank you for participating. Thank you for supporting Walk Boston. And I encourage everyone to give as generously as you can to support their work across the entire state. What I would hope to do today in the next couple minutes is really just share a little bit about my experience, how I look at accessibility, how I look at walkability, and some of my experiences related to that, both as an endurance athlete, as well as someone who moves through the city every day. I actually had a college professor. Oh, and I also wanted to start, I had to text my daughter and wife this question, but I also want to thank Walk Boston for making this an accessible format. So again, it's Kyle. I am a white male, middle-aged, mid 40s, balding with glasses and brown eyes. My daughter added a couple adjectives that I'm going to leave out for today, but maybe I'll drop them into the chat later. So I had a college professor who encouraged us, is actually the professor who I liked the least. And partly because when you walked into his classroom, you had to take off your hat, you couldn't wear a hoodie. But he had one point and said, continue to learn regardless of what you do. And that could be a structured classroom environment, or that could just be learning on your own. And thinking about Walk Boston and thinking about my own activism in the community, I have been essentially a lifelong learner. However, my learning has evolved over the years as I've experienced more life experiences and things that kind of impact me on a day-to-day basis. And I was thinking earlier today about going back to about 2005. I actually worked with a neighborhood access group, and they're wonderful allies like John Kelly and others. I had the opportunity to work with Felix Arroyo, the city councilor, the father, the senior, and we were approached by the neighborhood access group to do a walk around brick sidewalks and the lack of accessibility around sidewalks. And I remember I was still early on in my identity as someone who was blind or visually impaired, partly because it really didn't impact me all that much on a day-to-day basis. And I remember taking a step back and watching the individuals who are wheelchair users navigate the sidewalks, knowing that at some point of time, I may be in the same situation as they are, and needing to benefit from adequate curb cuts and good straight lines on sidewalks. And I also learned a huge, huge life lesson at that time that I've really tried to stay committed to moving forward. And that is this notion of of participation and how to engage individuals around issues that you're talking with. And there is this kind of motto that I've learned, and I've tried to be true to it, is that nothing about us without us. And it really struck me that time, and watching the individuals who wheelchair users engage elected officials, engage folks from the city transportation department, and really advocate for themselves. And it was a turning point for me, who, like I said, I wasn't quite comfortable with my vision loss at that point, but it really resonated with me. And it's something that I've really tried to kind of carry forward. I've also learned a tremendous amount through my endurance running. And folks often ask, why do you run the distance that you run? Why can't you be like someone like Brandon, who hammers 5Ks, in 16 to 17 minutes? Partly because I'm really slow, partly because I like to suffer, and I like to kind of the mental aspect of running 100-mile races, being out in the woods and on the trails for anywhere from 23 to 28 hours. And one of the biggest takeaways from that is, one, that's a really long period of time and you get hungry and you eat a lot of food, but it's also, I've learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's taught me how to move through that, but it's also taught me how to be a better person in all walks of life, whether it's the workplace, personal relationships, being a father of a teenager, and also as an athlete, and also as someone who moves through the city of Boston every single day, mostly on foot or via public transportation. There are so many times that I felt uncomfortable trying to get to point A to point B. And I've tried to lean on my techniques that Meg and my orientation mobility specialists have taught me, but sometimes you just need to sit and feel uncomfortable. And I've really tried to focus on that. And it at times hasn't been easy. Even managing my own vision loss, which has happened over a period of time, has been incredibly difficult. And I share this in true honesty that, in my late 20s, early 30s, I realized that I was incredibly angry with my vision loss. And I felt like things were being taken away from me, things that I love to do, like being outside and skiing and running and playing intramural softball and baseball. Through therapy for a couple of years, I realized a number of things, but one of them was that things weren't necessarily being taken away from me. I was giving up on them. And it taught me the way both to kind of cope with my anger, but also to learn how to adapt. And it's those adaptation skills that I've really tried to apply in moving through times in which I am uncomfortable. And how can you be comfortable in that space? And like I said, it's really paid off in the workplace, because work is work. You're never going to do, even though we all love what we do, you're never going to love it 100% of the time. And in relationships and moving through the city. And I know that things change on a daily basis, partly how my vision changes. So I've really learned to kind of be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I've also learned that patience and kind of this continuation of where my vision is and how it translates to movability and walkability almost changes on a daily basis. And it's really interesting over the past 7 years, particularly as my vision loss has decreased, my exposure to individuals who experience the same things as I do has increased. I worked at the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired for about 7 years prior to working with Mayor Janey. And before I started working there, I was, let's say, early 30s. I had never met another person who was blind or visually impaired. And when I started working there, obviously I had coworkers, program participants, and it was this really interesting thing that I learned so much about my own self in trying to support others. But it also came to this realization that it was interesting. My wife would often comment that, I started using a white cane all the time, which was way long overdue. Apologies to Meg and others for that. But I started using a white cane. But I also realized that how empowering individuals are and how I can gain confidence by simply being around others. But there was also this time, particularly in the winters, where I started to pull back a little bit. I would be more cautious about when I was going out because of the sidewalks and ice and snow, to the point where my wife made some comments, and she has been beyond supportive, but she pointed out, she's like, you have almost become kind of more timid as you've realized that your peers are also timid in a sense, right? So it was that interesting juxtaposition around exposure and how that was kind of how I was internalizing that. And that was the motivation I needed to really kind of push myself, become incredibly uncomfortable, and just continue doing what I was doing. And that takes a tremendous amount of support and skill building, but it also takes a tremendous amount of advocacy and work that Walk Boston and many others do on a day-to-day basis. And for me, it was really about relearning the environment that I live in, and I'm continuing to relearn that as my usable vision decreases, and it's very likely I'm going to lose everything. Or on my site, I should say, usable vision. So I've had to relearn things on an ongoing basis. So I've become so much more acutely aware of our built environment and what it takes for me to be able to move through the city and space and be able to commute and pick my daughter up from school, and then also run and walk. I do most of my long runs and training throughout the city of Boston. So I benefit from the work that Walk Boston does and the work that so many folks in this call do, and ensuring that our cities are walkable. And I think walkability is defined in many different ways, and it's also defined by geographic. I happen to live in Roxbury, and I can tell when I'm walking through certain streets or neighborhoods which way I go. If I walk towards Nubian Square and Warren Ave, or if I walk towards the South End or Back Bay. There's a stark difference between our built environment, and I applaud the work that Walk Boston does and others, but I also implore you all to continue doing this great work, especially through a racial equity lens, and ensuring that our paths and our parks and our sidewalks are accessible, but that accessibility should translate to all of our neighborhoods and all of our cities and towns. So it's super exciting to see Walk Boston be able to kind of grow across the state and do the work that you're doing. I also know that in my free time, I've spent a lot of time, running in advocating for public spaces, and particularly for the trail races that I do. Partly it's selfish, right? I want to be able to participate in races, whether it's a 5K or 100-miler or anything in between. So I've spent a lot of volunteer time over the past 5 or 6 years working with race directors, including, I think, the Walk Boston 5K. Brandon reached out last year, but I spent a lot of time, giving race directors all throughout the country some advice. And they all ask, like, why do you do this and what's important about it? And for me, what's important is, at the end of the day, my peers, folks who are blind or visually impaired, athletes, or individuals with amputee or other mobility challenges, at the end of the day, we really just want to do what we love to do. And at times that takes intentionality and that takes purpose. Regardless of if the will is there, we also need to be able to kind of be super intentional about it, get that technical assistance, and then be able to implement it. So I'm proud of the work that I've done, not so much because it's work that I've done, but it's opportunities that I've helped create with these other races for people to play outdoors in the woods or on the trails or even on road races. So that advocacy and that intentionality to me is really important and kind of embodies the spirit of friendship of Walk Boston as well. And I was also thinking earlier today, kind of what does accessibility mean to me? And at the end of the day, it comes down to two things. One, it's the sense of independence. It's why I live in the city of Boston. I shout out to all the city of Boston employees and the streets and the public works who do a phenomenal job across our whole city. But I live here because it gives me a sense of independence. Being able to move and know which routes I'm going to walk that are accessible is really important. Like I said, it allows me to walk along Melnia Cass Boulevard and think about the upcoming changes and improvements there when I walked to my daughter's school for 6 years. It allows me to walk her to school, drop her off, and then get to work. It allows me to run and participate. It also allows me to get to work, take the train downtown. And even in the winter, I've started to learn that we know that we live in New England. Things are never perfect, but I have learned which routes are more accessible based on, snow removal, but also just based on that built environment. Where are the good curb cuts? Where are the lights that, the accessible light features in terms of crosswalks and signaling and so forth. So it's created this great sense of independence for me, in which I don't necessarily have to rely, even though I have great support systems, I don't have to rely on individuals getting me from point A to point B. I can do it on my own. And finally, related to independence, accessibility to me means choosing in that choice. And that's the most important thing I can underscore in the work that Walk Boston does, is that you all are providing choices for individuals to leave their house at night to pick up takeout, knowing that streets are going to be plowed because of your advocacy, or there's going to be clean curb cuts, or there's healthy, walking paths for us to do what we want to do outdoors. It allows me to choose where I want to work. I know that I can essentially work anywhere because of that built environment. And that power of choice is incredibly important and freeing in a sense. So I just wanted to end by thanking Walk Boston. Thank you to the sponsors of this event. Thank you to the staff, the board, and you all as participants and supporters of Walk Boston. Thank you for the work that you do and the commitment that you have to inclusion and accessibility. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Kyle. We really appreciate it. We're going to open it up a little bit to some Q&A. This is how we've done it the last couple of years for the annual meeting, where people can ask questions of Kyle or ask questions of Stacy, ask questions of them both. So feel free to send me a message, put it in the chat, either publicly or send it directly to me. I do have a couple questions. So Kyle, in your your day job in the Office of Housing Stability, have you seen connections between housing stability and the use of public space? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I I've only been here for 3 months, so I'm just getting more and more exposed to the inner workings of the office. But I did spend about 6 or 7 years on the City of Boston's and Commission for People with Disabilities. So I'm familiar with, and I worked in community development and building affordable housing years ago. So, I think it plays a huge factor. It's both from, no pun intended, but on the ground floor, it's really just building units and apartments and homes that are accessible, that have built features that, and those built features, I think we've moved on from just ramps and curb cuts and elevator access buildings to let's build out those apartments, to make sure there are wider doorways, there are sinks and that are dropped at a lower level. So maybe for folks who in using wheelchair users and so forth. So I think it's on the top of the agenda for this administration. I think it's always been something that the Mayor's Office of Housing, previously the Department of Neighborhood Development, has been focused on. And there's a great connection between, architects and the review process that the Disability Commission does, tying it into the development of housing, whether it's through the Mayor's Office of Housing or the Boston Planning Development Agency as well.
Great. It looks like we have a question from Carol Steinberg. So Carol, I'm gonna send you a ask to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Hi, Kyle. I'm Carol Steinberg. I am on the board of Walk Boston. I'm a wheelchair user, and it's just so nice to hear your talk and meet you. It's just incredible. And I wasn't gonna, I didn't even think about talking about housing. I was gonna talk about other things, but you mentioned housing. But we can talk about that offline, because I was on the Architectural Access Board for 9 years, and I'm working on legislation about accessible housing that you might be interested in knowing about. But I will put that in the parking lot, as they say. Because I was going to ask more personal question because of your talk. I just loved it because it showed, I could cry. It just showed such vulnerability, which is so important to, to bond with other people. And so I wondered how you felt about asking for help and accepting help. And I just to say, what I feel is that we can't have that independence you talked about, the choice you talked about, unless we're willing to ask for help, to get the accommodations we need and to accept help. But I know a lot of people feel differently. Like, you're ashamed, and also you don't want to accept it because you feel like you're being patronized or whatever. So if you could address that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot going on there, and happy to connect offline as well around the housing piece. And also thank you for your work and commitment to Walk Boston as a board member. Wow, that's a big question. I also don't know if my mother she was planning to join, so apologies, Mom, if I get too personal here. However, I think asking for help is huge. I mean, I also, as a white male with a tremendous amount of privilege and ego, it's been hard for me. I mentioned that I did my white cane training, and then I immediately put my cane away for about 5 years. I never used it. I was ashamed. I didn't want to. I ran into people. My wife would joke, like, you don't see the faces that people make when you run into them, because they have no idea why you're literally running them over at times. So it took me for a while. And I look at using a white cane as a step towards or connected to help. I think it's important for us to get out of our own way and realize that help is going to empower us and potentially others. I also think there's a direct connection between social media and social media right now, and I think a lot about this with my daughter as well, who's 14. It's, we can create and paint these really perfect lives in social media. Like, things are great. We're out, we're having food, we're posting smiley faces and doing selfies with friends. It almost creates sometimes this false sense of reality. And I do think it sets folks up when they are vulnerable and they need help. It creates this dynamic where you may not always be sure or confident to do it. So I do a lot of talking with young people, and I think it's an evolution, and I still have problems with it. I'll be honest with you. I still struggle at times. I mentioned that I'm doing my orientation mobility training right now, and my trainer, rightfully so, had a white cane out as well. So we were practicing, and a person came up to us and said, oh, do you guys need help? And I bowed up and I was like, no, man, I'm good. And then I realized, like, oh, they saw like 2 folks using a weight cane, so they're kind, right? But it's still hard. And sometimes it's based on the day and it's based on the mentality. But I also know that it's the right thing to do. It's just sometimes hard to get there. And it's a evolving process, I feel like, with anyone. And like I said, the therapy that I went to reduced a lot of the anger that I had, but it's a work in progress, especially as I continue to lose my vision and start thinking more and more about, losing all of my usable vision and how that will impact my running, my work, and my relationships.
Thank you. We could talk for a while, but no.
For sure. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol. That was a great question. Kyle, one more question that came in. You said that your usable vision. Can you share a little bit right now about what your vision is and what it was at one point and how it has changed?
No, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Yes, I'm happy to do that. So I'm not very good at doing succinct answers. So right now I'm down to about a 2 to 3% field of vision. And that's so going outwards in a sense. So I have really restricted tunnel vision. It's almost similar. My daughter has told me not to say toilet paper roll, but paper towel roll instead. And I am very honest with folks. I do have 20/40, 20/60 corrected vision, which is why I wear glasses. So it's really confusing to folks when I say, oh, I'm legally blind, but you have glasses, especially when I'm on the train. I sit down, I pull out my phone, I put my weight cane away. I could just feel people being like, I have no idea what's going on here. And that's decreased. So I was diagnosed at 11, declared legally blind based on my peripheral field at 19. It didn't impact me a whole lot growing up, except I was never eligible to have a driver's license, but I played high school sports. I almost played college sports. And then it really impacted and started to change probably in my late 20s, which also coincided with like the social emotional impact of it as well. And I have retinitis pigmentosa, RP for short. So most folks who have RP will lose all their vision, or maybe get to a place where they just can tell kind of shadows or if the lights are on and so forth. Did that answer it?
Yeah, that was great. Because I feel so many times people hear that someone's visually impaired and then they think that they can't see at all. So I think hearing a little bit more about that is, I think.
Yeah, I think, and Meg can correct me, but I believe the number is 5% of individuals who identify as blind are what we call like totally blind. So that leaves a huge subset of folks who have some range of kind of usable vision or the ability to kind of see lights or shadows and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's even less than that. There's a total spectrum of legal blindness, from total blindness all the way over to legal blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot in between. And someone even with Kyle's eye disease may see better or worse, even with the same acuity and the same field loss. But Kyle, I was going to ask you about travel at night, because you would have night blindness.
Mm-hmm.
How is the lighting at night when you go out? Or you more cane dependent?
I'm super cane dependent, and depending who you talk to, I have a lot of opportunities to develop stronger cane skills. So I'm working on that. But I'm actively moving to a place where I'm learning orientation mobility skills, not based less on my visual acuity and visual cueings, and more on my white cane and my hearing and so forth. So definitely impacted by night. I'm a creature of habit, sometimes by nature, but at night I travel the same routes during time change. I've been working, so I leave at work. If I had a lot of work to do, I would make choices again, right? So I leave work during the daylight just to get home. And then I work from home, because then I don't have to travel this new work route, which I did get very helpful orientation mobility training. And that's also a piece of it too. Like when I started a new job, I had to learn a new route. And I also had to learn a new route that was maybe longer than what I ideally wanted because of the city built infrastructure. So the way I travel from Haymarket to our office, there are a couple intersections where there are not talking signals. So I was trained and encouraged to take, it's only like not even a block or two out of the way, but really rely on the talking signals to help me safely cross streets. And then when the specialist came to my house, like it was amazing that she identified like my two most common routes. She said are the two most dangerous routes that I could be walking to work. One is through a crosswalk with no traffic signal. And the other is I know, sorry to freak you out, Meg, but the other is a crosswalk or a signal at the corner of Tremont Street and Menlia Calf. That is not a audio signal. So I'm just totally relying on cueing off of the traffic patterns and guessing right.
Yep.
So Kyle, I'm going to jump in, Brendan, because I know we're at 6:15, but I also have a really, I think, Walk Boston connection that I think would be really interesting to get your thoughts on, Kyle. So we're starting a new program where we're working with the mobility trainers and also senior caregivers on how they and their clients can be pedestrian advocates. So I wonder if there's one or two things that you might suggest that we be sure to include in that type of program for either the trainers and or the individual clients that they work with, about how they too can make change by becoming pedestrian advocates themselves.
That's a fabulous question and program. So I would off the cuff say, for the trainers, I train sighted guides that I run with and that run with others. So I just tell folks to ask really good questions, but don't ask personal questions. Like I tell folks, like, ask me what I can see based on what you want to, like how I need your guiding and your support, but not necessarily just because you're curious to like, oh, so what can you see, right? How can I be a better volunteer or guide? Frame the questions that way to begin with. And then the other pieces will come as you build a relationship. And then the other is, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but like, finding a low tech way to document the issues and concerns that folks have as they're out traveling. Like I said, I walk everywhere, and maybe because I'm lazy or not, like every crosswalk, I'm like, oh, I should report that to the city, or I should report that to the Disability Commission. And it just takes time. So I think, some sort of tool to help document those areas of improvements and opportunities to improve like the built environment would be really cool.
Awesome, thank you.
We did have one question come in for you, Stacy. So the question is, Walk Boston's advocacy seems to focus on helping people tell their own stories and state their own needs. Can Stacy talk a little bit about why that's important to the success of your work?
The storytelling aspect is the question?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. I think Walk Boston and all of us who study the built environment have a tendency to get really wonky and go out and look at the environment and say what's missing. But what's really important is how individuals experience that environment and how we can help them to make those choices that Kyle's talking about, and not only have the sense of independence, but also the sense of belonging in their neighborhoods, in their parks, in their public spaces, on the T, on the transit. And so understanding people for who they are, where they are, and what they need is incredibly important to make walkability central to any community, and in a community in which any of us would want to live. That would be my answer to that one. But it's an amazing question, and I think stories just allow us to connect with one another.
Great. Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good answer. And Kyle, you were nodding along with that one. Okay. Are there any other questions? I think there was a softball question. I think this is an all play, both of you. It was in the chat. It was, what is your favorite ice cream? So.
I mean, peanut butter cup. There's no other answer.
Yeah, you and my dad, Kyle, they love the peanut butter cup. I'm a chocolate person, so anything with chocolate, anything mixed in with chocolate, I'm all for. So I like that softball question.
Great, perfect. Yeah, I think that that is a decent question to end on, but I would be reticent to not say this one more time. Thank you to everyone that made a donation so far this evening. You still can make a donation. go to walkboston.org/donate. We really do appreciate all of you being here, and we appreciate all our speakers, everyone that came and joined us tonight. This has been an absolutely great evening. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you in person in the future soon. And have a wonderful night.